Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge. I'm currently working on uploading the first game review video for the channel. And so today I wanted to take a few minutes and just sort of discuss the format that I'll be using for reviews on the channel here. Let you know what to expect and how the reviews will be structured. Now, first of all, there will be no rules explanation in the reviews. Most of the games that I will be reviewing are just simply too complex to allow for a full rules explanation in the space of a review video. But that doesn't mean that I won't be talking about how the game plays. So I will be giving an overview of gameplay to give you a feel for how it plays, maybe a better idea of whether or not it's something that may interest you. And I will be talking about specific rules or game mechanisms in a lot of cases because they're noteworthy for one reason or another. Either it's really inventive, really clever, or perhaps it's really clunky and just doesn't work. So after a brief overview of the game, we'll take a look at the four areas that I usually consider when I think about whether or not a game is any good. The first of those is the components to the game. And the components cover everything, all of the physical aspects of the game, everything from map boards to counters, charts, rule books, even the box itself. And they'll be judged on aesthetics as well as functionality. So you can have the, most gorgeous looking game ever, but if the charts are indecipherable or the map is unclear, it just becomes an unplayable mess. Likewise, you could have a fantastic system, but if it is hideously ugly, that is going to detract from your overall game playing experience. After looking at the components, I'll go on to talk about the gameplay, and this is probably where we'll do most of the discussions around rules involved in the game. And gameplay covers not just the rules and how the game works, but also just the overall game experience, the feel of the game. Whether or not the game is fun, does it present interesting decisions for the players to make, that kind of stuff. This is sort of the heart of the game playing experience here will be covered under gameplay. Third, we'll look at the historical accuracy or theme of the game. Now, I am not one who subscribes to the idea that these games that we're playing are simulations of warfare. They really aren't, and they can't be due to the limitations of the medium of board games. You can't delude yourself into thinking that we are simulating warfare when we sit down to play these games, even the best of games. However, that doesn't mean that a really good game can't capture the essence or the feel of whatever subject matter it happens to be on. As an example, if I sit down to play a tactical American Civil War game, say on the Battle of Gettysburg, something similar to the Great Battles of the American Civil War series or the Line of Battle series, and I see my artillery batteries zooming across the map more like panzer battalions than actual Civil War artillery batteries, it's an indication to me that maybe there's something off about the design. It just doesn't have that feel. When I sit down to play a strategic level World War I game, I expect a different experience and feel to the flow of the game than I would if I were to sit down to play an ancient tactical game. So that's kind of what I'm getting at with this whole historical theme / accuracy category. If you sit down to play a Battle of the Bulge game and you see that the Japanese 37th Infantry Division is in the order of battle, you're going to be scratching your head and kind of wondering about the quality of the design. And lastly, I'm going to take a look at the replayability of the game. As you're all aware, modern board games are expensive investments, and quite frankly, a lot of older out-of-print games can be ridiculously expensive as well. And if you're like me, you want to make sure that you get the most bang for each of your gaming budget dollars. And that involves how much time you're going to be able to spend with the game. You could have a fantastic design, but if after about 3 or 4 hours of play, you've kind of explored the limits of what the game has to offer, is it really worth plunking down that $80 or $100 for that kind of experience? What I generally look for is a solid design that's going to offer me the opportunity to come back to it again and again, pull it off the shelf once a month, a few times a year, heck, maybe even once a week if it's really good, and just continue to get hundreds of hours of play out of it. That's where that sort of that value for your money comes into the equation. And for each of these four categories, I will assign a score from 0 to 20, with 20 being the absolute best. The exception to that is going to be the gameplay category, because gameplay, I feel, is really sort of what it's all about when we sit down at the table. That is actually going to be weighted double. So I'll be giving gameplay a score from 0 to 40. And at the end of the review, when we get into the summary section near the end, we'll go ahead and total up the scores from all four of the areas that we've looked at. And that's going to give us an overall score from 0 to 100. Obviously, with 100 being sort of that unicorn perfect game out there that at least I have yet to discover. I found a few that come close, but I haven't seen a 100 yet. Now, of course, that begs the question for a lot of you, well, okay, so you've got a scale of 0 to 100. Well, what's a good score? I would say that if a game's overall score comes in below 50, it's simply not worth your time or your money. Now, I don't anticipate there being very many games that I review that end up falling into this category, but there may be a couple out there. Primarily because if the game is that bad, I probably won't be willing to commit enough time to the game to do an in-depth review of it. Now, if the game scores in the 50s, maybe as high as 60, this would be something where I'd say, you know, if a buddy of yours has it, sure, go ahead, give it a shot. Play it if you can find it for free, but it's really not worth buying or owning. Now, games that score in the 60s, these are things that that can be fun to play. You might want to consider buying it if you're really into that topic. Let's say you're a big fan of Battle of the Bulge games. This game that scores in the 60s would be something that you might want to consider picking up, because you may get a little more enjoyment out of it because of the subject matter than I necessarily did. But it's one where I could probably name 3 or 4 other Bulge games that are better. Now, once you get above a score of 70, these are games that I would recommend you actually purchasing and owning. So games that score in the 70s up to maybe 80, these are games that are really solid games that should be a part of your library, especially if you are a fan of the subject matter. These are games that I would have no problem sitting down to play someone anytime they're on offer. Now, games that score in the 80s, these are superior games for their subject matter. These are really, really good games. Games that see a lot of play by me and my group, and games that really are worth checking out. Even if you're not interested in the subject matter, maybe you don't go out and buy the game, but it's definitely worth you playing at least once or twice. And I think these are games that are so good that even if you don't have a strong interest in the subject matter, that just the game experience, the gameplay will kind of draw you into it. So those would be the games that are scoring in the 80s. And if you find a game that's scoring above 90, these are candidates for top 10 lists. These are sort of best of all time kind of games. These are probably going to be in the rare category. As you might expect, these are games that I would consider essential games for any game library, even if you don't necessarily like the topic. If you do have any interest in the subject matter, these are must-buy games. So that kind of gives you an idea of how my rating system is going to break down. And by going in and actually assigning numerical values to the various games I review, not only is it going to give you a sense of just how enthusiastically I recommend a particular game, it's also going to give you the ability to sort of compare games side by side by looking at not just their overall scores, but then by the scores for the various areas that I rate them on. For instance, components. It will be easy for you to see which games I think have nicer components, and you'll should know why. Having watched the review, I'll go in and explain why I'm rating various games higher or lower in the different categories. So just wanted to kind of run through the structure and format of how we're going to be doing reviews here at the Tabletop's Edge. And I hope to have our first review, again, for Wings of the Motherland uploaded here very shortly. Thanks for watching today. Take care, and we'll see you next time.